Hello and welcome to the video series on Build with Dark, where we're going to look at more realistic scenarios of using Darklang for different tasks that you do in backend. And the first thing we're going to look at is how to use Dark to generate JWT tokens. This is quite a common thing. I put some links in the description of what is JWT if you're not familiar with it. It is a set of security credentials. Essentially, it's like a secret that you pass to your user when they give you a login and password, and then they won't send you login and password anymore. They send you this secret thing instead of sending you plain text login and password, which is quite insecure because it can be listened on the networks and things like this. So to do this with Dark, I like to work with some requests which I already have made. So we can see that, let's make a variable first. Oops. Let our header, and we grab it from the request, and then from the headers, and our headers actually has the serialization. So if I press dot here, we'll see the serialization header, and now our header just contains of the serialization header. So we would like to decode this because it's actually base64 encoded string. So if I try to do this and I just click here, I can actually see that, but it's not a valid string because we have this basic part. So if I press Shift Enter here, I can start the pipeline. And you might notice that I'm using different editor. This is the default editor for now, so they switched back to the old editor until the new editor becomes more solid, I believe. So we can replace basic with nothing, and this will give us essentially these credentials, and then when we base64 them, we get login and password, which is what exactly we need. Just so that we have it easy to work with, what we can do is if I press Shift Enter when I have this selected, I can say that I want to split this with a colon, which we had over there. And now we get an array instead. So let's wrap all of this into a let. And you will see there is some kind of issue here because, so what I recommend is scenario like this: when you have a pipeline, if you try to wrap this in let, it will kind of wrap this part. So it's, the easiest thing is to, if you press Shift Enter, when you have a pipeline selected, it will select the whole expression. And then we can wrap this in let, and now it's doing the correct thing. So this is our credentials essentially, and to create JWT token we need two keys. So the way that we get those keys is I put them as assets in here already, so I don't need to copy paste them into functions, and I have functions here for private key and for the public key. So the way you get assets here, there's no buttons as you can see. If you go to your terminal and download the Dark CLI, you just specify canvas and then you configure your environment variables, which is Dark CLI something. You can just search in the help here to see what it is. Yeah, it tells us this is the environment variables which we can use, which I've already done. And as soon as we give it the file name, it will deploy it automatically and it will tell us the hash. And then we just use this hash and the dot here, confusingly. I think it's because we can upload the folder, not just the file. So because we just have a file, we need to tell it, I just want the file. I don't want the file within the folder. So we use that hash, and that hash allows us to grab that file from there. So as we got so let's get the private key first. Keep typing this OK today. And after we got the private key, we can now generate the actual JWT header. And I'm going to use first the generator one with just the key. So we need the private key here and the payload. So this payload is essentially whatever you want to put in your secret. So if we create a payload here, and let's say we want to put a user there, and the user will be just our credentials first. That's me trying to do JavaScript on dark. So if I press Shift Enter here, I can get the head element, list head, yes, and that should give us just a login. And as you can see, the payload, and I'm not pressing anything, I'm not executing, I'm just looking at the evaluation of the code, which is very nice and dark to be able to do this. And we can actually run this thing. So if I run get private key, as you can see, I cannot run this before we have a dependent variable, which creates side effects. So we need to run this first. And then I can run this, and we can see this key. So if you now work with JWT, the way to check it is if you go to jwt.io, we can actually make sure that our JWT is correct. So if I paste it here, we need to also paste this public key. So I'm just going to get the cat of the public key, and then the cat of the private key, which is just pasting them into buffer, and signature verified. So what it tells us is that for this private and this public key, when we verify it, we can make sure that it works correctly. We don't have this header, so we only have the payload. They do recommend to put the header there, just in case if you change the algorithm or something like this in the future. So we can actually use a slightly different function for this. There's JWT sign encoded with headers. So we pass private key, we pass the headers, which I don't have yet. So I'm just going to use an empty dictionary for now, and we pass the payload. And so I don't want to write this dictionary here. I can extract a variable, and as you can see, this extract variable doesn't do what exactly we want. So this is quite a common thing in the old editor. The team said they gonna fix it in the release, but until it's in beta, it's gonna be like this. So here's the easy hack. If you press Command X, you actually extract it from here, and then you can insert the let, call it headers, and paste it here. So quite easy, I find, to do it this way. And we can just copy the variables here. I cannot paste here, so if I try to paste here, so for example, if I do this, actually copy this, paste this here, you see nothing happens. So we do need to type this manually, 256, I believe, and the type is JWT. And if we sign this again, which not gonna work, yes, because I didn't specify the headers. So if we get this now, this is a new JWT token. It does display in red kind of because this is the default. So if you want to have different headers, they're actually not missing, as I correct myself. They default to something which is what this function provides by default. So when we use JWT sign and encode with just the private key and the payload, it actually put the headers there. You will notice that they changed. So if I copy them from here, that's a bit tricky, paste it here, you notice that it's not RSA anymore, it's res, and it was switching to RSA. So if I type RSA here, let's say I'm using my own algorithm, maybe even 255 XXS or whatever the algorithm I'm going to invent, and we encode it with our own credentials, which is not the default ones, then, or maybe we just want to add some kind of credentials there, then eventually I can copy this, and you will see the header is different. So this has a header already, it just shows us in red because it's kind of trying to convey to us this is the part which has the header. So this is practically how much code do you need. We don't need these headers, to be honest. So if and this is the trick in the old editor. In the new editor it's easier, but the new editor is kind of not ready yet. So if you want to delete the line on top, it's kind of a very strange way to do it, but what I usually do is I remove this line, then remove this line, and then I copy back the line that I wanted. So it's kind of a hacky way to do it, but it works. So So let's go back to PO and try to do the request again. And that didn't work. So let's see why it didn't work. So we got the key. We got, oh, because we're still signing with the headers. So let's just sign without the headers. Put just the payload. And if we refresh this, we get the JWT token. And we actually get it. We're not going to get different JWT token every time because it's the same signature and it's the same login password. So if we want to add something like an expiration date here, for example, let's say in our payload here, we want to say that it expires in, and usually we put something like so we convert this to seconds, and then we can just seconds, I believe is just so let's see if we do date now, and the seconds is just a number, so we can add we could have actually just added before we added the seconds. So let's just add first. Returns in date seconds after D. So we want to add, let's say, number of seconds. Maybe it's a usual math problem. 60 by 60 by 60. So this is, I believe, 60 minutes. And as you can see, I've tried this before. So in Dark, you cannot do this. So what you need to do instead is write 60 and then kind of do the pipeline, multiply it by 60, and then if we want another, multiply it by 60. It kind of looks strange when you look at it in the beginning, but it allows you to very nicely see that, okay, this is 360, and this is actually how much this. So you can see at every step in execution what the value looks like. And let's just convert all of this to seconds. So we get the right format for expiration. Okay, so now if we have everything correctly, our token will slightly change because we are changing the number or the expiration date every time. So this is very simple to do. As you can see, the JWT token, we've done it in less than 15 minutes and very little code we need. If you compare it to how you do it with Node.js or any like framework like even Ruby on Rails, it is very, very easy to do in Dark, even with the custom headers or with expirations dates and things like this, and doesn't really require a lot of community float. And as you saw me, I can see all the way along where and what is happening and what's the data in here and like at every step. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you have any other ideas that you want us to show or how do you do this in the backend with Dark, please let me know. Thank you for watching. Till next time.